Joining us this morning to talk more about this and other issues is Elizabeth Wydra. She's the president of the Constitutional Accountability Center. So, Ms. Wydra, your reaction to these developments ahead of the 9:30 hearing this morning?
Yes, good morning. Thank you so much for having me on and talking with you and your viewers. So, the Supreme Court in a 5-4 order last night allowed the sentencing to go forward. And that was really, frankly, the common order of things to allow the sentencing to go forward this morning. And especially because Judge Merchan telegraphed before the sentencing that he was not going to sentence President-elect Trump to any jail time. So, any potential burden or interruption of his presidential duties would not occur as a result of this sentencing, because he's not going to sentence him to any jail time as a result of his conviction for these felonies. The Supreme Court, obviously, because the normal course of things would be to allow the entire appeal to continue after sentencing, is not shutting off that avenue of legal challenge from the president-elect. But they did just affirm that even when you are a president-elect, the normal order of the rule of law applies to you. And so that's what we're seeing this morning. And frankly, the only surprising thing from the Supreme Court was that it wasn't a unanimous ruling and that there were 4 of the justices who would have allowed him to stop that normal order of the rule of law and postpone the sentencing. What it does mean, and I think why President-elect Trump fought so hard to stop the sentencing, is that even though there will be no jail time, he will be entering his second term as president as a convicted, sentenced felon. And that is something that is unprecedented in American history.
The proceedings slated to take place at 9:30 a.m. Eastern time. There will not be cameras in the courtroom. Can you lay out what will happen, what you think might happen in these proceedings?
Well, obviously, this is a case of great public interest and a unique case because it involves a president-elect and a former president. But what will happen today is something that happens in courtrooms across the country to everyday people in America, which is they face accountability for crimes that they've been convicted of by a jury of their peers or a judge on a bench. And so that's what's going to happen to Donald Trump today. It's, I think, in some ways, a very real representation of the principle that no one is above the law. And he, like many other people who have been convicted of crimes, will face sentencing today. Of course, because he is going to be president, he is not going to receive the sentence that he might have otherwise received, although we don't know that because the judge did not give that alternative, which is appropriate. But, it is just a normal criminal proceeding. It's something that happens in the due course of things. And that is what President-elect Trump will be subject to today.
Elizabeth Wydra, I'd like you to respond to our last guest, John Malcolm, who talked about the merits of the case itself. I'll have you respond to what he had to say.
Well, accused himself in the first instance. This is somebody who sat in judgment of the Trump Organization's CFO, Alan Weisselberg, which was an unrelated proceeding. He had donated personally to an organization called Stop Republicans. He had donated personally to the Biden-Harris campaign in 2020. His daughter, Lauren, is a major strategist and fundraiser for Democratic candidates and fundraised off of this very trial. He also denied a motion to change the venue. Donald Trump is not very popular in New York City. He certainly faced a very hostile jury. He admitted lots of extraneous evidence. This was a documents case, a business fraud case. It's actually a misdemeanor, but it is ramped up to a felony if it is done for the purpose of concealing another crime. So a documents case, he allowed in very salacious testimony from this porn actress, Stormy Daniels, about this alleged one-night stand that took place in 2006, including testimony about how she felt intimidated by Donald Trump when she was in his hotel room. There was all kinds of extraneous testimony from Michael Cohen. The prosecution got to enter into evidence stuff about his criminal convictions. It's usually the defense attorneys that want to highlight a witness's criminal record. But here, it was the prosecution that wanted to highlight that because one of the many crimes that Michael Cohen pled guilty to was a federal election campaign finance violation. And the entire theory of the prosecution was that this business fraud records, case was designed to cover up a campaign finance violation.
Elizabeth Wydra.
John's last few words are really getting to the heart of the matter here is that, we're talking about a hush money case, these payments paid to silence Stormy Daniels for a much larger purpose, which is to try to influence the outcome of a federal presidential election. And, the lying and the cover up and the purpose of those hush money payments are what led to the felony charges. And there was a lot of evidence that, the intention of hiding these payments to Stormy Daniels was to have an impact to make sure that voters did not have what could have been key information to them in making their choice at the ballot box. And that's something that's very serious, interfering with the sanctity of the people getting to make their voices heard at the ballot box when it comes to who will be serving as president. And look, a jury of his peers decided that, based on the evidence presented to them, that he was guilty of those 34 felony counts. And that's the way that the criminal justice process works. And it works whether you're a former president and a president-to-be, or if you're just one of everyday New Yorkers who is also subject to the same rules and laws, and when they don't abide by them, are held accountable.
Before we get to calls, your reaction as well to the reports by Jack Smith and his investigation, the special counsel, and whether or not they should be made public.
Well, so I think it's important to note that Attorney General Garland made clear to publicly release the part of the report that dealt with the January 6th insurrection and President Trump's role in that. The classified documents case, which is ongoing with respect to President Trump's co-defendants in that case, will only be available for in-camera review by the most senior members of the House and Senate Judiciary Committees. So, any prejudice to those legal proceedings would not occur because that will not be publicly available. I think it makes sense in the public interest. This obviously was an incident that struck at the very heart of American democracy, the attempt to stop the peaceful transfer of power according to the people's will as expressed in the presidential election in 2020. And that is a deeply serious crime against constitutional democracy. And so even though President Trump obviously is no longer subject to those criminal actions, Jack Smith dismissed those charges in accordance with long-held Department of Justice policy that a sitting president cannot be criminally prosecuted. That doesn't mean that the underlying facts are no longer true. And so I think this is appropriate for the history books, for Americans to know this information. And I will be very interested in seeing that report when it is eventually made public.
House, and you heard the president-elect there say that he will be appealing after today's hearing.